Welcome to the Natural Remedies seminar. In our Natural Remedies seminar, we're going to be looking at poultices and compresses. And the first one we're going to look at is castor oil compresses. It's not a poultice, it's a compress. Castor oil penetrates deeper than any other oil. And wherever it penetrates, it can break up lumps, bumps, adhesions. So great for cysts in the breast, for breast cancer, great for irritable bowel, great for constipation. It's very good at breaking up stones in the gallbladder, kidney stones, bone spurs. If the bone spur has been there 3 years, it might take 3 months. If the bone spur's been there 3 months, it might take 3 weeks. Little by little, the body heals, so be patient. So I'm going to make a compress. It's like a little pack. The thicker the pack, the more castor oil it can hold, and the more castor oil can go into you. Now what I've done is I've cut up an incontinence pad. I've cut it up and I've opened it up and I've put a few layers of cloth in there to make it thicker. And what I'm going to do is put masking tape on the edge. So the beauty of this is the plastic isn't really touching you. So the only thing that's touching you is the paper topping, and it's got that cloth insert, and the plastic's on the back. And the plastic is really just to protect your clothes and stop oil going everywhere, which you don't want. So I'm just going to seal those edges. And then I'm going to put the castor oil on. Now the reason why I'm doing this first, so there we have our little pack. Now to secure that, I just staple the edges. I used to stitch it with a little cotton and thread, and my staff came up with this great idea of stapling it, and it takes about a 1/16 of the time, and it holds it quite nicely. And I'm doing it now because it's going to take a little while to soak in. And what I do is I basically do the middle third, because as it soaks in, it'll spread out a little bit further. I can't hold that up now, but probably in about 15 minutes I will be able to hold it up. You see, it's such a thick oil, it just sits on top. So you've got to give it time to soak through. I haven't covered it because then there's no leeway for the excess oil to go. And also when it goes on your hot body, the oil will thin and spread out a little bit more. So you want to give a little bit of room for spreading. This compress can be used maybe every day for a month, and then you might make another one, because it's not drawing anything out of you. It's just a vehicle to hold the oil so it can go into you. And this size I've made here, that's a great size for chest, for congested chest. That's a great size for abdomen. And that could be cysts on the ovaries, it could be fibroids in the uterus, it could be constipation, it could be irritable bowel. So that's a nice size for those areas. How long would it take? Well, it depends how big it is, and it depends how long it has been there. Consistency is the key. The second thing I'm going to look at is the humble onion. Now the onion can be used cooked or it can be used raw. To use it cooked, we'll look at cooked first, and this is the first poultice that I ever did. My first daughter, I was 23 when she was born, so I think I was probably about 25 when she got an earache. And I was trained as a nurse. Even though I was a bit of a hippie and starting to grow my own veggies and all that sort of stuff, I didn't know what to do about an earache. And everyone said to me, don't play with the ears, she could go deaf. So it was really out of fear and lack of knowledge, I went to the doctor. He wrote her a script of antibiotics. I gave her the antibiotics, I didn't know what else to do. Within 24 hours, the earache had eased. When she'd finished the antibiotics, the earache came back. I did not know what to do. 6 weeks later, and 4 courses of antibiotics later, the earache comes back. But I still don't know what to do. So when I went to the doctor, I said, will my daughter be on antibiotics for the rest of her life? which I'm beginning to come to this conclusion. He was challenged by my question. So he sent me to an ear, nose and throat specialist who looked in Emma's mouth, then her ears, and he said, she's teething. Give her these drops to keep the eustachian tubes clear. And that was it. So let's fast forward 2 years later. Next child is 18 months and gets an earache. I do not go to the doctor and I don't tell anyone. I have to do something though. So I went to the lady that lives next door. So I was, 26 or 27 by now. She's 85. I said, what did your mother do when you were a little girl and you had an earache? She said, Mum would steam up an onion on the stove. So I went home, I steamed the onion up on the stove, and then I cut it in half under her directions, so that what you're looking at is the rings. So you keep the skin on and it keeps everything in place. And I wrapped the onion up in a cloth, a few layers, and the few layers of cloth will help to keep it warm, but also just to shield the direct heat from being too hot. I tested it on my arm and I put it on his ear. I covered it with a piece of plastic, and what that does is that just insulates it. And then he was just a little boy, I was breastfeeding him, and I could put the onion between his ear and my arm, and I could feel the heat. And when he slept, I laid him down on the bed, but I laid him down on a towel that had been folded up about 8 times because I knew that that would keep it warm. You can keep it on for as long as you can keep it warm. What did they do before plastic? They used a wool square. So you can certainly use a wool square. I make a lot of my own clothes, and in the winter I make a lot of woolly skirts. So I have squares, and you can also put a woolen square just this side of the plastic so that the plastic doesn't even touch you, but it is stopping the moisture going through and insulating it and keeping it warm. James slept for 2 hours. When he woke up, he was happy. I watched him all day and the next day and the next day. That was it. Just compare my experience. 2 hours sleep with onion on his ear, and then my last experience with my first daughter, 6 weeks and 4 courses of antibiotics. No wonder I went into natural remedies. I was excited at the prospect. So I went down to the newsagent and I bought a book that had A, B, C, D, E, F, G in it. And I started my natural remedy book. And under E, I put onion compress. I have since learned that you can steam it and squeeze it. And if you squeeze it, you'll get a few drops of juice out. This is when it's hot, and it'll be boiling hot, but when the hot juice hits the spoon, it'll go a nice temperature, and you can put that in the ear. You can even use, one of these little, soak it up and squirt it straight in the air. The other place that you can use a cooked onion is for a boil. A lady told me about this. She had a boil on her back and she told her friend, and she said, we need to cook up an onion. See, an onion is a drawer. And she put the onion straight onto the boil. Obviously she waited till it wasn't going to burn her, but it was still quite hot. And then she put that plastic square over again if you don't want plastic on the skin, and I can understand that. You can put a wool there because wool will insulate. And then she taped it on. And she left it there for 24 hours. And when she took it off, everything came out. She said she's never had a boil resolve so quickly. So what the heat does, it draws it to a head, and the onion's drawing it to a head, and then it all comes out. She was very impressed. So the cooked onion can be used on an earache, and the cooked onion can be used for a boil. Once you've used the onion, you must discard it because it does draw poisons into it, so it needs to be thrown out. Now we're going to look at the raw onion. There's a couple of places you can use the raw onion, and one is for a sore throat. Now if you want to tell a friend about this because maybe they've got a sore throat, they can go to YouTube and Google Barbara O'Neill, and there is a onion natural remedies lecture there, poultices. So for the sore throat, you finely slice the onion into a few slices. And what we do is, if the sheets get old, you just tear up the sheets. And then you put this sliced onion on the cloth, and you fold the cloth over, and then fold it back over. And then that will go around the throat like that. And then you can wrap a scarf around it, nice woolly scarf, and you can go to sleep with that. And it'll bring relief to the sore throat. I think we all know that when you cut up an onion, you're likely to cry. Is that right? So that's a clear indication that that onion juice is very good at breaking up mucus on the chest, in the throat, in the head. And what I'm going to do now might surprise you. I'm going to put the onion on the bottom of the feet. So why do we put the onion on the bottom of the feet? We put the onion on the bottom of the feet because the bottom of the feet, or the feet I should say, are a reflex for the chest. And we're going to put the onion on the bottom of the feet for if someone has a bad cough in the night. And I'm going to use a plastic bag. Now at Misty Mountain we buy boxes of starch bags, so they're made out of starch, and that would be the best. Now if you don't have starch bags, you can certainly use a cloth. So you might use a cloth, put the onion like that, and put it in the bag. And then what you do is you put your foot on the onion like that, and then you twist it around and put a sock on. So the bottom of the feet is touching the onion, and then you put a sock on and it holds it in place. Now my grandson, he was 3 at the time, I was visiting my daughter, and he had a bad cough, and she gave him a hot bath, which always eases the cough, and put him to bed, and he was coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing. And we thought he'll be asleep in a minute, but he kept coughing and coughing. So after half an hour I said to Em, let's do the onion. So we got him up, we chopped up an onion and put half the onion chopped up on one foot and half on the other foot, and put him to bed. Not one more cough. It's almost unbelievable. You almost have to do it to believe how incredible it is. Not one more cough for the whole night with the onion on the bottom of his feet. So that's great for a night cough. Now I'm going to show you how to make an onion cough mixture. And the onion cough mixture is a very simple thing to do. You chop up the onion and then you layer it in a jar with honey. So we're going to chop it up small. Of course, the smaller the better, because the larger surface area you'll have. So I've got a jar here. So I'm going to put about ½ an inch in the jar, and then you drizzle honey. Probably about a teaspoon. And then another layer of onion. Again, ½ an inch, and then another drizzle. Oops, that was a bit heavy-handed, doesn't matter. Then another layer of onion and another drizzle of honey and a final layer of onion. So if you had a house full of people that had a bad cold or a bad cough, you might chop up another onion and fill your jar. And then we finish with more onion. I'm doing this early in our demonstration because by the end of the night, the syrup will have formed. You see, if I put the jar on the side, all you see is that thick, gooey honey and onion. By the end of our demo, you will see a clear, runny fluid forming, and that's the cough syrup. After 24 hours, you strain the onion out and you're left with your cough syrup, and you keep it in the fridge. How long can you keep it for? Well, a German lady told me that she'd had hers in the fridge for 8 years. Because honey doesn't go off, does it? So once you take the onion out, it will keep indefinitely. So for a little child, maybe under one, you might do 1/4 teaspoon. For a 2-year-old, you might do 1/2 teaspoon, say 3 times a day. For a child from about 10 above, you might do a teaspoon 3 times a day. So if a child's got a cold or a cough or a bronchitis, any respiratory, asthma, so you give them the teaspoon 3 times a day and put them to bed with the onion on the bottom of their feet, and everyone will sleep soundly that night. So that's the raw onion. Now we're going to have a look at a relative to the onion, which is the garlic. I was reading one research paper that said garlic is 6 times more potent than tetracycline. Now, tetracycline is a antibiotic. To have it as potent as an antibiotic, or to play a role as an antibiotic, you must have 3 raw cloves a day. So an adult will have 3 raw cloves like that. For a child, you might halve the dose. Now, in your books, there's a recipe for the flu bomb. And the flu bomb has 6 ingredients. This is how I remember it. I remember it by 2s. Garlic and ginger. Garlic as much as you dare. Ginger, probably about 1/4 teaspoon finely chopped, and the garlic you finely grate. I was going to say, this is a great grater. That sounds like a pun, doesn't it? But I love graters like this, and when I'm cooking, I just grate straight into my pot, and I'm going to use it in a minute. And you can even travel with that little grater. So you see it's quite fine, so you'd finely grate the ginger and the garlic into a cup. So there's your first 2 ingredients. The next 2 ingredients are 1 drop of eucalyptus oil. If you haven't got eucalyptus oil, you could use tea tree oil. One lady said, but Barbara, it says on the bottle you must not consume it. And I said, well, I'm not asking you to drink half a bottle. We've got some common sense, haven't we? No, it's not very common today, I realise that. So 1 drop. It's an age-old remedy. People have been using it for centuries. Well, Australia's the land of the eucalypt. And one 80-year-old lady told me this 40 years ago. She said when one child had a cold in their house, the mother would put a few grains of sugar on a teaspoon and a drop of eucalyptus oil, and they all had to have a dose. And, you know, it's been used for centuries. The reason why they say you must not take it is 40 years ago, a little boy in Tasmania, you've heard of Tasmania, that little island at the bottom of Australia, he drank a few mouthfuls of eucalyptus oil and went into a coma. So they banned it. Now, there was such an uproar about it that they legalised it again, but if you buy eucalyptus oil in Australia, it's got poison on the bottle. Do not take, and it's because of that. How many young men have died from drinking a bottle of scotch at a party on a Saturday night? Has the alcohol been banned yet? No, it doesn't make much sense, does it? So we're looking at the 6 ingredients. So we've got garlic and ginger, 1 drop of eucalyptus oil, and cayenne pepper as much as you dare. Some can handle a sprinkle, some can handle 1/2 teaspoon. Occasionally, some can handle 1 teaspoon. We'll be talking about cayenne pepper in a minute. So there's 4 ingredients. The last 2 ingredients are the juice of a lemon and the teaspoon of honey. So it's a really expanded lemon and honey drink that many people have taken for colds. And then you add about 1/2 cup of water. So if you feel a cold coming on, flu, any respiratory, of course, what's all the go at the moment is COVID. You take a flu bomb 3 times a day and it'll be gone in 3 days. Of course, at the same time, you've got to exercise and drink all your water and eat very lightly. So that's the flu bomb. Another way some people take it is they'll have a bowl of hot soup and they'll just grate the garlic straight into the soup. and you can certainly do that, but you've just got to have that clove 3 times a day to take the place of antibiotic. Even though they say it's equal to antibiotic, it's also antiviral. It's also antifungal. It's also anti-yeast. So it's a remarkable, we'll call it a herb. What about a little baby? How do you put it on a little baby? Well, you finely slice a couple of slices, and then you bind it to the bottom of their feet. So this can be done for a little one, and I'm going to do it with a piece of paper towel, which you certainly can do it with, and you cut a strip. So what I used to do it with was a piece of cloth, but you certainly can use some paper towel, and you'll see why, excuse me, that's important. So I'm putting 2 slices of garlic there, and then I'm folding it over, and then that is wrapped onto the bottom of the baby's foot like so. So can you see what I've done here? The garlic does not touch the skin. If the garlic touches the skin, it will cause a blister. Now, it won't really hurt the baby, it's just then you'll have a blister and you won't be able to apply the garlic till the blister heals. But if you put a piece of cloth or paper between the skin and the slices, it will not blister. I used to then put a sock on or a little bootie. My son James was having a lot of chest problems, so I often did this to him, and he was 3. And I'd put his sock and his shoe on, and he'd go outside to play, and every foot he takes, he's treading on the garlic, and so the slices allow the garlic to be taken up little by little. It takes 1 minute for 1 drop of blood to go right round the whole body, and within a few minutes you could smell the garlic on James' breath. So that's how you can do it to a little one, to a baby, is on the soles of the feet. But remember, you don't put it straight on the feet. Onion you can, but not the garlic. The onion, when you put the foot goes straight, rests straight onto the slices of, or the chopped up onion, but not the garlic. Now, our castor oil has soaked through. You see that? Yeah. So that's ready to apply. And you can also make it early and even fold that over and put it in a little bag and keep it for a later date. Now, when you are using the castor oil, probably about every 2 days, you might find it drying a little, and then you'll add a little bit more castor oil. So you might find if you're using it for the month, you'll apply the castor oil every couple of days. So I'll tell you an incident that I had recently with the castor oil. I have to give you a little bit of background. When I lived in the rainforest for many years, whenever we drive through the creek to go out of the property, we'd lose our brakes. So I got used to driving with my clutch. So I'd slow down using my clutch. Meanwhile, I'd be pumping my brakes, because sometimes it would take half an hour before I had proper brakes again. I just got used to driving like that. So let's fast forward to, where are we, 25 years later, and we mostly have automatic cars, but my husband recently bought a car that was gears. And when I started driving it, you know the pathways we have in our brain, we're going to look at this on Saturday morning, I just flipped back into my old way of round the corner, I'd use gears. And when I was slowing down, I'd use my gears. So my left leg is getting a lot of use, especially because this was a 4-wheel drive. It was sort of and I'm just a little lady, so it took a lot of strength. After 2 weeks, my leg began to hurt from my knee down, and I thought, well, I've just overdone it. And I've just overdone it, and my leg is not used to it. So I went over to the automatic car again. A month later, my leg is still sore. Now, when it's still sore, you got to put your detective hat on and go a little bit further. So I saw my son, who is trained in remedial massage, and he's fairly brutal, is my son. He just tells me to breathe. It hurt. And he said, Mum, you've had an old injury on this leg. And I had. And I remember 10 years ago, I was walking down steps and I was talking as I was walking and I tripped. And the point of the step, my shin went straight on it. It hurt. I put a poultice on it for a few days and then that was enough and I was fine. But I always had a little bit of a dent there, so I must have maybe dented the bone or something. I don't know. Never gave me a moment's trouble after that. And he picked up that an old injury, can you see we've got a few threads coming together? An old injury, overdoing the leg, and now I'm in pain. And he said, this has got a lot of scar tissue there, which I'd never had pain there. And Peter was brutal. And I decided to choose a gentler way to break up the scar tissue. So I made a castor oil compress. I probably made it half that size. And I bound it onto my leg, my shin area, down near my ankle. And I wore it 24/7. I wore it to bed. I wore it through the day. I just wore it. I think I wore it for a month. After a week, I went and let Peter do another session on me, and I'd forgotten how much it hurt. I didn't see him again. But the point of my story is I wore it 24/7 for a month, and I noticed no pain. I have absolutely no pain there now. But it obviously penetrated deep, it broke up that scar tissue, but I had to be diligent. I had to be very diligent with it. I decided to use the gentler approach over Peter's manual breaking up with his thumbs of this scar tissue. Point is, you got to keep at it. 1 or 2 applications really won't do much. You've got to do it again and again and again and again. So yes, I drive an automatic car now. Now we're going to have a look at ginger. Ginger can be used internally and ginger can be used externally. Internally, it's an anti-inflammatory, but it's probably mostly known for its anti-nausea effect. If you buy car sickness or seasickness tablets, it's compressed ginger.